שלום וברוכים הבאים. כחלק מהמאמץ שאני עושה פה בערוץ, ואתם יכולים לראות, ואתם גם מדברים איתי כחלקכם על מה שהעליתי בפרקים האחרונים, זה להביא אורחים שקשה למצוא אותם בתקשורת הישראלית, אבל הקול שלהם מאוד חשוב, כי הם מספרים דברים שאנחנו צריכים להבין, אנחנו צריכים לדעת, זה חשוב, לא להיות ככה בתוך דלת אמותינו וככה, לסגור את מה שמתרחש ממש מעבר לגבולות שלנו. אז נכון שזה לא כל כך נוח, כי זה לא בשפה העברית, ויותר קל לנו רק לשמוע ולא לצפות, אבל מכיוון שהקולות האלה אכן חשובים, המאמץ שאני עושה מעבר להביא אותם הוא לצרוב כתוביות על הווידאו עצמו, אז מי שיותר קל לו יוכל כמובן לצפות וליהנות גם עם התרגום בעברית. להציג את האורח שלנו, רוברט ספנסר, שהוא גם סופר, הוא גם היסטוריון, והוא גם מבקר מאוד חזק ונלהב את האסלאם הרדיקלי. הוא הוציא יותר מ-20 ספרים, הם גם התפרסמו כרבי מחר בניו יורק טיימס. יש לו אתר שנקרא Jihad Watch, והוא נחשב בין ה-20 המובילים בתחומו, והוא מרטיט, מרעיד, לא נותן מנוח בתחום אחריות שלו, כי הוא אומר את הדברים שלו בצורה חזקה וברורה, וגם אנחנו רוצים לדעת מה הוא אומר, במיוחד אחרי אירועי 7 באוקטובר, ולאור העובדה שאנחנו נלחמים בכמה חזיתות מול האסלאם. אז שתהיה לכם צפייה מהנה וכמובן מועילה. Hello, Robert Spencer. What an honor to have you in my podcast. How are you doing?
Well, the honor is all mine. Thank you. Very good to see you.
I waited a long time, but it was worth it. You know, I read your bio and I thought to myself, where do you find all the time to write like 20 books, articles, having a very successful podcast? It's like you are running a life of, I don't know, at least 2-3 human beings.
Well, it's something to do.
So before we are starting with the real things about what you are specializing, I think it will be smart to start to tell about yourself, because part of my audience doesn't know who you are. And
Yes.
I think your history and your background about your childhood is also important. I
Okay.
had a feeling that it's connected to what you're doing right now.
There are some connections. I suppose that's true of everyone. In any case, I am director of Jihad Watch, which is at jihadwatch.org online, and it is a news and commentary service about jihad activity of all its forms in the United States as well as around the world. We are very strong supporters of Israel because we understand that Israel is facing the same jihad that struck the United States on September 11th, 2001, and on many other occasions since then on a smaller scale, of course. And it is the ideology, the beliefs of the jihadis that we focus upon, because they have been almost completely ignored, denied, or willfully misunderstood by some of the leading foreign policy analysts around the world. And so we try to shed light on the aspects of this conflict, this global conflict, that others would prefer remained in the dark. And I've written a large number, as you noted, of books on this issue, various aspects of this issue, including the history of jihad, which is the only history of jihad around the world that I know of that exists today. The Palestinian delusion, which is about the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Arabs, and about the history of the peace process and why every negotiated settlement always fails to bring that peace. And of course, the answer to that goes back to jihad once again, and to the theology of Islam. Also, I've written a new translation and commentary on the Quran, the critical Quran, Muhammad, a critical biography, which is obviously about the Prophet of Islam and the historical accuracy of the records concerning him. I have a book coming in March called Anti-Semitism, History and Myth, which is about the explosion of anti-Semitism since October 7th, 2023, and
Wow. I
is an
want us to talk about it later on.
all right.
But before we are going to dig in the jihad and Islam and Muhammad, if I understood right, you was born in Turkey, right?
No, no,
No?
my grandparents came from
Ah,
Turkey. I
okay.
was born in the United States.
And they
They
were
they
forced to
were
convert into Islam, right?
they refused to be forced to convert to Islam, and so they were exiled. They were Orthodox Christians, and they left. They were forced to leave their home at gunpoint. My great grandfather was murdered at the time by a
Wow.
Turkish soldier, and the rest of them were able to get out and come to the United States. This was because they did not want to convert to
Convert.
Islam. It's an interesting thing that many Turks today are taking DNA tests and discovering to their horror that they're Greek or Armenian. And that would have been my family's situation had they remained.
So in a way, you was born and raised, and the atmosphere in your home was this story. You talked about it. It was something that was very alive in your family, or it was just a case.
It was certainly discussed, but it was always in a positive way. My
Really?
grandmother in particular was very, very romantic about Turkey and how beautiful it was and how she loved being there. And then I would always ask, well, then why did you leave? We were exiled. Why were you exiled? And she didn't want to talk about that so much. That's what led me to want to study the area to find out what had happened and
And
what it
you visit Turkey
meant
since
that.
then?
I'm sorry?
You've been in Turkey
Have I
since
been?
then?
No, I don't think it would be wise for me to go. Having written critically about Islam and Muhammad, if I were known to Turkish authorities, I'd probably be arrested, and so I'd rather just
No,
not
no, no.
go.
We don't want it to happen. So let's start with definition. You always saying jihad, and you are talking a lot about Muhammad. Probably you want to expose his personality and the legacy he brought to the world, and how people up to now continue with his method and legacy. But what is the difference between jihad as you see it to Islam or to radical Islam? Because you're doing a very strong separation between both of them.
Actually, radical Islam is something I don't ordinarily speak about. Uh, it's it's a misleading term, I believe, because the teachings of the Quran and the teachings of Islamic tradition and theology and law are radical by the definition of non-Muslims. That
Mhm.
is, Islam, in all its sects and schools of law, contains teachings calling for warfare against unbelievers. And consequently, all Islam is radical Islam in a certain sense. Now, that doesn't mean every Muslim is a radical Muslim, because the teachings of the religion are one thing and the way people put them into practice are another. That's, of course, true in all religious traditions,
Mhm.
that there are people who are extremely observant and devout, and people who carry the name of the religion, but they don't actually observe it,
Mhm.
and everything in between. And so there are Muslims who are perfectly happy to live with non-Muslims and will never be waging jihad. But the theology of jihad and conquest and subjugation of unbelievers is deeply embedded within Islam itself. Now, jihad means struggle, and there are many struggles in Islam, just as many struggles in Arabic, as a matter of fact, as there are struggles in English. In
Mhm.
English, you can struggle to quit smoking, or struggle to lose weight, or have a great struggle between civilizations, and it's the same word. And it's the same thing with jihad. There are as many struggles in the Islamic context as there are in English. But the theological understanding that is primary among Muslims throughout history of jihad is warfare against unbelievers in order to establish the hegemony of Islam over societies around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so this warfare is considered to be a sacred act. This is what Westerners and non-Muslims have such a hard time understanding. How could people massacre people at a dance festival, at a music festival, and think that they're righteous? Well, they believe that because the Quran tells them to fight, to wage war. It even says fighting is prescribed for you even though you dislike it.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, somebody who engages in this warfare, it is a supreme act of service and obedience to the deity as they see it. And so they simply do not regard it in the same moral categories as we are accustomed to seeing it. And it is the West's inability to understand the moral categories that they see what they're doing within that has kept us from understanding the entire conflict properly.
Mm-hmm. Because it's very hard to see the conflicts through jihad eyes. It's something that it's very hard for every human being with a common sense to understand it. But when the roots of it started, because the way I know history, it started from the moment Muhammad decided he wanted to started a new religion and to take out Christianity and Judaism, and he started to conquer and slaughter and rape. So it was, sorry to say it, but it was part of his culture, behavior, character. And like everyone who believe in Islam in a way supposed to adopt this kind of personality, the I don't know, like the divine personality as they see it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad is the excellent example. That's in the Quran, chapter 33, verse 21.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Muhammad is the excellent example, then that there's no qualification on that. There's no limit to it. Everything he does is righteous. And so if the believer wants to be righteous, he imitates Muhammad. Now, as you noted, Islamic tradition describes Muhammad as waging war, massacring his enemies, while breaking agreements with them, raping the women, and all of it is the behavior that is to be emulated. So you take, for example, the rapes, and we saw that on October 7th. And it's something also we've seen around the world. We saw it in Nigeria with Boko Haram. We saw it with ISIS. We saw it just a few days ago in Syria. Again, when the jihadis took over Aleppo. And this is a constant. If you read my book, The History of Jihad, it's constant throughout Islamic history. And the rape gangs in London, in Britain, all around the country. For years now, there have been gangs of mostly Pakistani Muslim men, and they victimize these young girls and turn them into prostitutes or gang rape them repeatedly. And for years, the strangest thing about this phenomenon was that fathers and sons would join in together.
Oh.
And nobody can understand that. You see what I mean? You're shocked yourself because you would think, a rapist, he's going to be doing this solitary in a solitary way, or maybe conceivably with a gang of his friends who are like-minded. But a father and son, you think that the father would be appalled and would tell the son to cut this out and not act this way. But they both believe that what they're doing is not only acceptable, but good and righteous and holy. It's a beautiful thing because they're imitating Muhammad.
You remind me on October 7, some of the young Palestinians, which they are Hamas, they are the same, I don't know why the words are separate between them, after he murdered in a very bad way, that they are not just killing, they are really cruel. Just for an example, they are taking pregnant woman cut the belly and taking out the baby and killing them in front of the mother eyes. So after he murdered a full family with 10 Israelis, he called his mother and father in Gaza, and he was so enthusiastic, telling them, wow, you don't know, I murdered 10 Israeli, and they pray to God, wow, we are so proud of you, we are so excited about what you did.
الو يابا يابا انا قاعد اكلمك من جوبا بسيم، افتح الواتس تبعه قول له وين، شوف كيف القتله، شوف كيف قتلك فيديو يابا، ابنك قتل يهود، هاي دخلت فيديو يابا. الله اكبر، ربنا يحميك يا رب، ربنا يحميك يابا، ربنا يحميك يابا. اكلمك من جوال يهوديه قتلتها وقتلت جوزها. الله اكبر، الله اكبر ولله الحمد. الله اكبر ولله الحمد. يابا افتح الواتس شوف كيف قتلت يابا، افتح بتدفع عليك واتس قول له وين بروح. ربنا يوفقك بالسلامه يابا، يابا بسيم يابا، يابا والله 10 قتلت، 10 بيدي يابا، يابا على ايدي، اعطيني امي اعطيني امي. يما يما يحميك يما، طول الليل 10 بيدي يما، طول الليل 10 يما بيدي قتلت، طول الليل ادعي لك، طول الليل ادعي لك. ربنا يرحمك بالسلامه يما، يما طول الليل ادعي معاك يما، ربنا يحميك يما.
It was really, they felt that he did something divine by that. So I can understand what you are saying. But in a way, I don't understand perfectly how the jihad connected to Islam. Like, how come some of them adopted it, some of them not? And the next question is, how come the West are so blind to this phenomena? Because they see October 7, they saw it, they saw videos, they saw picture, and it took them 24 hours to forget about it, to ignore it, to put it aside and present Israel as if it were the aggressor.
Jihad, well, like I said before, there are many shades of meaning to it. So, and in the West,
like what?
Well, the word means struggle. So you have the struggle to try to improve yourself and reject sin in a religious sense. So that's the meaning that most Westerners, non-Muslims, assume that jihad is all about. And then they think, well, there's some extremists who believe it has to do with violence. But actually, this is not really an either or. It's both and. They don't understand that when these jihadis are out killing and raping, they believe that they are actually improving themselves. That is the struggle, to reject sin and conform one's life to the example of Muhammad. And they don't understand that. See, in the West, in the United States, but also in Europe, there are very powerful Islamic groups today. In the United States, it's the Council on American Islamic Relations and the Muslim American Society, the Islamic Society of North America, and they are Muslim Brotherhood organizations. As Hamas, remember, is Muslim Brotherhood for Palestine. So these are dedicated to advancing the same goals that Hamas has, but they don't do it by violent means, they do it by nonviolent means. And that means in one large aspect of their endeavors is to confuse people about what Islam and jihad are all about. So they say, somebody like Spencer, who speaks about jihad as violence and savage brutality as pleasing to Allah, he's just somebody who hates Muslims, and thus that's why he's saying this. And they've gotten all of the media and all of the governing authorities and the law enforcement authorities, everyone, to believe it's hateful, it's racist, it's bigoted and Islamophobic to say that violent jihad is actually part of Islam. But you asked about the relationship between jihad and Islam. Violent jihad is actually very clearly what jihad is in the Quran and in the Islamic traditions about Muhammad. I didn't make it up. It comes from many, many passages in the Quran. Kill them wherever you find them is 3 times in the Quran. Fight until religion is all for Allah is twice in the Quran. Fight until persecution is no more and religion is all for Allah. There are many other passages that have to do with fighting. And it's very clear when they say fighting, they don't just mean argue with them or have a discussion or dialogue. Because, for one thing, chapter 8, verse 41 of the Quran speaks about the spoils of war and says you have to give a fifth to Muhammad. Now, how can you give a fifth of a spiritual struggle to anybody? It's obviously a hot warfare they're talking about, and you take the possessions of those you have killed and you give a fifth to the Muslim leadership. This makes it very clear that they're talking about violent warfare. Muhammad speaks about there being nothing greater than jihad and says that if it were up to him, he would go out and get killed in battle and come back to life and get killed in battle and come back to life and get killed in battle over and over again. But instead, he decided to stay and direct the others to get killed in battle. But the idea is very clear in saying things like that, that when he says there is no greater act than jihad, he means warfare. He means taking up arms and fighting. And there are innumerable examples. We could spend the rest of this discussion talking about examples where it's very clear that Muhammad is speaking about armed battle as the primary form of jihad. You can refer to my biography of Muhammad or the history of jihad to get the sources on this. And so when these Westerners pretend that this is some form of extremism that is twisting the peaceful religion of Islam, this is the dominant view, but it has no basis in actual Islamic theology. And there's never been a form of Islam that teaches coexist peacefully as equals with unbelievers. And that's very important for Israel in particular. When you're talking about nowadays, there's more talk than ever about establishing a Palestinian state. If a Palestinian state were established, it will be used as a new jihad base to destroy what's left of Israel. There's nothing, it would not coexist peacefully because that possibility is not allowed for in Islamic theology.
But you know, it amazed me all the time how come the Palestinians succeed to build a narrative and share it all over the world. The story of Palestinians apparently never was Palestine. This is not a war over territory. After all, the Arabs themselves are an occupying empire. And anyone who understands a little bit of history sees the territories they have conquered since the beginning of Islam, including the Middle East. The issue is that they succeeded so well, branded their struggle as the matter of occupation. And the West, which apparently itself suffers from a feeling of guilt for years of being involved in the slave trade and colonialism itself, they are buying the story of the victim who was expelled from his land. So this is very important to say that from perspective of Palestinians, who are actually Arabs, by the way, the whole world belongs to them. It's not about Palestine. For them, the whole world belongs to them. It's just a matter of time until it will happen. You know, in Gaza, Hitler's Mein Kampf book, it is in every school. UNRWA, which was responsible for education in Gaza together with Hamas, introduced this Nazi ideology to the students. In every education center, there were performances by students of how they are murdering and killing Jews. And in their textbook, the heroes were the most terrible, cruel terrorists. This is who are they admire. Did you ever ask yourself who are the heroes of Palestinians or the Arabs in Gaza? In southern Lebanon, by the way, both the Quran and Hitler's book were found in homes. So it's I don't know if to say ridiculous, but in a way it's absurd because the West thinks that this is about Israel, while Israel is just a stopover on the way. I don't know if someone read Hamas charter, and if he is not, you can go online to read it. It is a basic document with a strong anti-Semitic and anti-Western and extremist Islamic worldview. The charter emphasized the organization ideology, commitment to destroy completely the state of Israel through a strategy of long-term violent struggle. And despite, by the way, all of this, Israel is trying to manage this war in the best possible she can. You know what? Listen to what IDF high-rank colonel and Professor Gabi Siboni is saying.
נלחמים מול אויב אכזר, אבל נחוש מאוד. הוא נחוש מאוד, הם מוכנים למות. זה מה שהם עושים, הם מוכנים למות והם מתים. עכשיו, פיתחו את הדוקטרינה של לראות עלינו מקרב אזרחים, ולהתגונן באמצעות אזרחים, וגם אזרחים, בואו נגיד ככה, כאילו, מתחפשים לאזרחים, מתחפשים לנשים בעזה, מתחפשים לנשים כדי להתקרב, ולסליק את הנשקים, להתקרב לחיילי צה"ל ולפגוע בהם, או להניח מטענים. הסיפור הזה של איך אנחנו נלחמים, הוא סיפור מאוד מאוד מורכב. עכשיו צריך להבין, בכל המלחמות בשטחים אורבניים שהיו עד עתה, עד למלחמה הזו, היקף הנפגעים האזרחיים ביחס להיקף הנפגעים, מה שנקרא מעורבים ללא מעורבים, כן? היה 1:10, האמריקאים בקואליציה שלהם במלחמה נגד דאעש ברקה, 1:10, 1:9, על כל מעורב אחד 9 אזרחים נהרגו, שלא לדבר מלחמת העולם השנייה, וכמובן ביפן וזה, זה מספרים מטורפים. וצה"ל הצליח להגיע ל1:1, למספר הכי טוב אי פעם, ולמרות זאת מאשימים אותנו בפשעי מלחמה.
And after we heard what he said, it is important to say that Islam also has another side, a friendly, social, they are very welcoming human being. You know, you can see Muslim women all over social media marketing the hijab as a fashionable and cool clothing. So it may be a side that looks very attractive to the Western culture. Nice part of the Islam is making them blind.
Well, that's certainly true. There is a great confusion in the West between Islam and Muslims. And so when I speak about Islam's teachings of warfare and subjugation and conquest and the destruction of the non-Muslim communities and the sex slavery of the infidel women and all the rest of it, people, like I said before, they say, oh, you hate Muslims, you're an Islamophobe. Well, this has nothing to do necessarily with any individual Muslim, because any individual Muslim may not believe or have any intention of acting upon any of that. Just like any Jew or any Christian may not have any interest in some particular aspect of their religions and may not follow these things or may not even be aware of them. And so the problem here is that there's been, and I think it's an intentional confusion. So people say that Andrew Bostom, the scholar of anti-Semitism, he calls it the my friend Ahmed syndrome, that people have a friend who's a Muslim and they say he's a wonderful man and he's very gentle and peaceful, so therefore Islam must not teach warfare. Well, that doesn't follow at all. Ahmed may be a wonderful guy who doesn't pay any attention to the warfare against unbelievers, or it may be that he's not all that devout, or it may be that he intends to do these things in other ways, because there's the jihad of the pen, the jihad of the tongue, all these jihads besides the jihad of the sword. So there's any number of things that might explain why an individual is a nice person, but it doesn't really change what the religion teaches. And if the religion teaches this warfare, then there are always going to be some believers who take that up. But the West has a very hard time understanding that.
Yes.
And also the Islamic groups in the US have been very skillful in portraying any criticism of Islam as racism and bigotry. And everybody's very worried about racism all the time. Mm-hmm. So you say that something is racist, then everybody runs the other way. And they're afraid. So they've gotten all the politicians afraid to say anything about Islam because they'll be called racist and they'll never get elected to anything.
So in a way, how do you access the impact of the political correctness on dealing with jihad in America, in Europe? Because you are not allowed to say a lot of things like what you mentioned. Every word you are accused to be racism.
Yes, it's been completely devastating. And so the average person today has no idea what we're dealing with or what's in the offing. And so, for example, you have the border question and the migration and mass migration into countries in Europe, mm-hmm. and to a lesser degree the United States, mass migration of Muslims. And all over Europe, if you say there's something wrong with that, or it's bringing rising crime and the rapes and everything else and jihad, you're a racist, so it can't be said. And they're even trying to outlaw the party in Germany that's against mass migration because they're Nazis. Well, it might be possible that you could not be a Nazi and still not be in favor of the Islamization of your countries, but the authorities are willfully blind to what Islamization means or if it's even a possibility. They just think some Muslims will move in and we'll have a multicultural society and everything will be wonderful. The idea of a supremely intolerant and supremacist ideology coming and overwhelming the rest, that doesn't ever occur to them.
זה היה פרק נוסף של דרך המחשבה. כל הפרקים זמינים באפליקציות הפודקאסטים, בערוץ היוטיוב ובפייסבוק. אם עדיין לא הצטרפתם, זה הזמן. להרצאות בנושא חשיבה יצירתית, חדשנות, יזמות, אסטרטגיה רגשית ומדיטציה, מוזמנים לפנות אליי ישירות ל-office@shiranraz.com. אני שירן רז, ויהיה איתכם גם בפרק הבא.